Booking your cruise with Princess can get a bit overwhelming and complicated. Today I'm sharing with you some common mistakes that I and others have made to make sure that you don't make them as well. Waiting for a last minute deal. So many people are like, I'm just going to wait to the last minute and pick up a last minute deal. This does not usually work well. What normally happens is they sell out of the best rooms beforehand, and then you'll be lucky if you get a leftover room. If you are looking to have a room with like 3 or 4 people, good luck, especially the most popular itineraries. They are going to sell out of those rooms so fast, and then you'll be left with nothing. Booking the cheapest price and always wanting that like best price cheapness, don't do it. Again, you're going to end up with the most garbage rooms at the worst location. You're going to have packages that don't include the things that you must have, especially if this is like a celebration cruise or like your first vacation in years. You do not want to go by the cheapest price. You just don't want to do that. For us, we often go by price because we cruise about 5 times a year. But for those that are like really wanting to have the best cruise experience possible, price cannot be the only thing you're looking at. Not knowing itineraries and the options available. You need to kind of have an idea of where you can go and what options there are. Maybe you're looking to go to Alaska and you don't know the difference between Hubbard Glacier and Glacier Bay. There is such a big difference in different itineraries and different options, even within the Caribbean and the Mediterranean. You kind of need an idea of what the options are for your cruises. Not understanding the ship types, the ship classes, the ship sizes, and what that means. So many people, again, especially when they're looking at price, they might book a ship and then they get on there and like, oh my gosh, this is so outdated. And it's like, yeah, it's the oldest ship Princess has. So you need to kind of know what you're booking in terms of ships as well, because some options, like for instance, like I specialize in Alaska. So Alaska, for instance, you could get on like Discovery Princess, which is one of the newer ships and the slightly larger ships, or you can be on the Star Princess, which is the newest ship that isn't even out yet and be brand new, but it's also the largest ship. Or you could be on like the Coral Princess, which is one of the older ships, but also the smaller ships. So you kind of need to know what ships and what amenities they have, because maybe you're like, oh, I really want to be in, I heard about the Sanctuary Collection. I really want to be in the Sanctuary Collection. Unless you know the ships, you might not even get the type of room you want. Not knowing the weather during the time of year that you are booking. So for instance, Alaska, the weather in say May, the early season, is going to be very different than in July, which is more mid-season. Same with like Mediterranean. We booked it for July, not thinking that about the heat. So Mediterranean in April, for instance, is very different than Mediterranean when we're going at the end of July. So like even stuff like that, that is a mistake we made, but I also have limitations on when I can book travel. Anyway, lesson learned, but it was also a very good price. So sometimes you got to make those sacrifices. But so many times I hear like, oh my gosh, I booked this cruise and didn't realize the weather in that location at that time. If you are looking for Alaska, I actually have a private Facebook group where I talk about only Alaska and only Princess with Alaska cruises and cruise tours, all the different destinations, tips, advice, and stuff like that. So link in the description if you want to go check out our private Facebook group. Booking a cruise that is too long or too short. This is a first-time cruiser mistake that I see often. Sometimes people will book a really long cruise thinking like, oh, it'll be fine. And then they find out that they're seasick. A 16-day Hawaii is not the best choice for a first-time cruiser. Or what they'll do is they'll book a short cruise, like a 3-day cruise, just to kind of test it out. And then it's way too short to actually get the true cruising experience. Especially if you're flying to your destination, like we usually do, having a short cruise isn't worth it. The cost of the flights these days and the hassle of flying is not worth having a 3 or 4 day cruise. My suggestion for first-time cruisers is always do at least a 7-day cruise, but usually not do any longer than a 10 or 11-day cruise. Booking at a time of year that you actually don't want. The amount of people that will book during a spring break and be like, oh my gosh, there's so many kids, or summer, and why are there so many kids? And even destination wise, there's variation with stuff like that, but even stuff like, oh, hurricane season, or wanting to go see whales and it's not whale season for Alaska. Those important details where you're like, I have to go see whales, and you're booking in like off season, don't do it. You kind of have to have some idea of what your must-sees are so that way you're not disappointed. Not understanding the style, the vibe, the energy level of that like ship or the itinerary or the cruise line. A lot of people will book with one cruise line, Carnival, because of the price. And then they get on and they're like, oh, I hate cruising. And it's like, you probably don't hate cruising. You might have just not picked the right cruise line. Same with Princess. People will book Princess and they're like, oh my God, it's so boring. And it's like, Well, you went to the Panama Canal on a small ship. Of course, it's going to be a less lively cruise than, say, the Caribbean. So there's definitely a vibe that changes in the destination, the ship size. Even I anticipate the Star in Alaska is going to be very different than, say, we're going on the Coral on Alaska. Very different vibes going to be happening on those ships just because of ship size and demographic that go on those ships. So depending on what kind of style and you're looking for and vibe, you kind of need to know what to expect in different destinations and ships and even cruise lines. Because Princess isn't for everyone, just like any other cruise line is not for everyone. Not knowing where the port is versus what you actually want to see. This is a mistake that we have made when we were looking at Tromsø. We didn't realize that we were going to dock so far out of Tromsø, and then we had to shuttle into town, and we were like, oh. Anyway, I see this often with Cozumel. Cozumel, people will be like, I want to go see the Mayan ruins. Yeah, that's an 8-hour excursion. You have to take a ferry to get to the mainland to then go on your excursion to get there. And they're like, can I do it on my own? No. So stuff like that where it's your must-sees, you kind of need to know where you're docking in order to do it. We have a couple ports coming up in the Mediterranean that we are nowhere near the must-sees, like Pisa or Rome. Those are long day excursions because you have to get from the port to the actual city center and the area and stuff like that. Pompeii isn't at the actual port. You have to plan accordingly if you're I have to see this thing. Just a side note, this is one of the main reasons I love Alaska, because you get off the ship and you're kind of there. I just love Alaska. Anyway, I'm not going to go on a tangent. Not getting insurance. Do not not get insurance. And if you are getting insurance, please make sure you know when you have to get that insurance by. For some insurance policies, you have to get it within 48 hours of your booking. Some, like the Princess insurance, you don't have to get until you make that final payment or by final payment. Don't make the mistake of not getting insurance. I am not licensed for insurance, so I can't compare packages. I can't do anything beyond just say get insurance. But recently I've had a client with a medical issue that needed medical services that was not that intensive, but over $11,000 US. We're in Canada, so that's a big chunk of change. Another client that had to cancel less than a week before their cruise because they had a medical emergency and they did not have insurance. Thankfully, it all worked out through credit card insurance and stuff, but sometimes the credit card insurance is not enough. And often with credit card insurance, you have to put your entire trip on that single credit card. So if you're like me and you have multiple credit cards and you're putting a little on this card, this little on this card, it's not going to work when you go for insurance. So make sure you get insurance. Don't screw yourself over. Not knowing port times is something else I've seen a lot of. We made this mistake on our third cruise. We love Puerto Rico, San Juan, the forts. Oh my gosh, we love it so much. We did not look at the itinerary times. So when we booked the cruise, we're like, yes, we get to go back here. We were coming in at night, in the evening, and leaving late. We are not night people. So for us, we actually didn't get to see what we wanted to see because the fort wasn't even open. Even on our most recent cruise to Puerto Rico, the forts were closed because we went there on Christmas Day. Anyway, we have not had luck with that port. But sometimes the port visits are very, very short. And so people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how short this was. I'm not going to be able to do the itinerary, the excursion that I wanted to do. So you kind of need to take a look. And now, passenger contract states that port times can change, ports can change. We've had that happen as well. But at least if you don't have that disappointment by being oh wait, I booked this cruise and didn't pay attention. Make sure you look at the port times, especially for the ports that you want to go to. If you want a longer day there, if you want a shorter day there, if you want daytime versus nighttime, check out those port times to see what times you're going to be in port. If you're finding this information helpful so far, make sure to subscribe because we put out videos like this all the time, all focused on Princess Cruises. Also, if you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member or doing a super thing, super sticker, any of those super things, because you are super too. Not understanding cancellation policies. You need to make sure you know, is your deposit refundable? Is it transferable? Any of those types of things. When is your final payment date? When is the cutoff for that cancellation? And then if you're past final payment and there's penalties, what are the penalties and when are those penalties? This kind of ties in with insurance as well, making sure you know what you have covered for when and what kind of things are acceptable for cancellation. All those things. You never want to have to cancel a cruise, but you never know. Life happens. Medical emergencies happen. Unfortunately, family emergencies happen. You just never know. So better know your cancellation policies before you put down your deposit. Princess offers 3 different package options and you need to know what's included in them. So many times I see people purchase a package that is too high for what they actually need, and then they're wasting their money. I've also seen the flip where people will book a package that's not enough and they're like, oh, I thought I got XYZ. And it's like, that's not included in your package. So make sure you're booking the package that is appropriate for what you want and what's included in those packages. Lots of videos on our channel. If you search up like Princess Plus, Princess Premier, any of those, we have videos that explain in depth what those packages include, but make sure you know that. So when you're booking your cruise, you're booking the appropriate package. This next one we have definitely had issues with before personally, is not researching flights before the cruise. Now, if you're like us and you're booking 2 years in advance, there is no way to know what your flights are going to be like before you actually are ready to book your flights, because you just can't book flights that far out. But you can do a little bit of research ahead of time and see, like, is there any direct flights? Is it always a layover? Are flights insanely priced? That's the one that we've had issues where we booked a cruise because of price, and then we're like, oh, the flights are more than the cruise. So do some research on flights ahead of time, because sometimes the flights can be outrageous. Sometimes the flights can have very long layovers. I thankfully know some of the flights now that I know that, like, I won't fly to this airport because I know there's too many stopovers, stuff like that. So for me personally, I have some of that info. And then for like local clients, I already have that because we fly from the same airport. But for other clients, I will like do a little bit of research and be like, no, you don't want to be flying here because the flights are horrible, or prices for flights. If I know that they're looking for a certain price range and it's like, well, actually your flight alone is going to cost you $2,000 per person, that kind of helps them out a bit. So make sure you research your flights ahead of time too. So many people don't realize that you need to be planning to fly in the day before your cruise. So some people are like, oh no, I booked this cruise and it leaves on Saturday. I can't get the Friday off to travel that day. You need to make sure that you at least plan at least one day. I recommend 2 days now because of flight issues. I guarantee almost every flight is delayed. And if you're flying international, that's more like 2 to 3 days. If you're flying during peak time, Christmas, Easter, any of those holidays, spring break, at least 2 days ahead of time, you want to be flying in. So I know it's hard for people with vacation time issues, but try to get that in. Coming home, usually not an issue, because if your flight's delayed, you're just missing work, but you're not going to miss your ship. You don't want to miss your ship. So plan ahead to make sure that you are able to fly in the day before. For some people, that might mean, like for us, during my spring break time, it was like, nope, I want to make sure my cruise leaves on the Sunday so I can fly in on the Saturday. Versus, oh, I need to be and leaving the Friday and I can't get that time off. So try to plan accordingly before you book your cruise, so that way your vacation time lines up, so that way you can make sure that you're flying in at least a day early. Few more tips to go for you. But if you're like overwhelmed by all of this and you're like, oh, I can never remember how to do all these things, and you're just like, I just want someone to do it for me, links are in the description. If you are Canadian, except for in Quebec, or American in pretty much every state, I can book for you. I am more than happy to help you out, and you will get so much information. I always give my clients port guides and cruise guides and information about packages, and we will make sure we get the right package for you. Links are in the description, but travelingbeyondboundaries.com is our website, and you can see there. Also, we are hosting a group cruise to Alaska. You can do stuff through there as well. But if you want just a proposal to be like, hey, I want to go to the Caribbean at this time of year, how much is it? That kind of stuff, go and check out the website and you can do that. But here's some more tips. Not fully knowing the ports, another huge issue, especially if you have accessibility issues and you don't know which ports are tender ports. Now, I can never guarantee that a non-tender port won't become a tender port. We had this happen twice in Alaska just because of overcrowding. Then the ship was forced to become a tender, or like the Skyway dock was being renovated, so we had to tender in. So we weren't planning, those are not usual tender ports. They're not listed as tender ports, but knowing which ones are typically tender ports, like Cabo San Lucas, 100% always going to be a tender port. Whether you use the accessible tenders, different story, but stuff like that, just knowing. Also knowing what's available to do in those ports, especially if there's like a must-see thing on your list, like you're like, I want to see whales. I 100% want to see whales. Well, maybe Juneau or Icy Strait Point needs to be on your itinerary, because those are the best ports that I have seen for that kind of stuff. So having stuff like that, knowing what is the best ports for those things. If there's certain things that are on your must-see list, you kind of need to research your ports and see which ports have those things to offer. Or maybe it's the other way around, where you're like, oh, I see this port on the itinerary, I wonder what there is to do there. Highly recommend looking at it ahead of time before you book, just so you have an idea. Especially if you're like us and you're like, I know I don't want to do excursions at every port because it's a port heavy cruise, or maybe you're just want a little independence, but you're like wanting to do some excursions, you kind of got to research your ports a little bit so that way you can know, like, is this a port that I can even walk around? Is it safe? Is there anything to even do there? Because there's definitely some ports that we've been to that it's like, there is nothing to do. You have to do an excursion. So doing your research ahead of time will really help you know, is that itinerary worth booking, or is there just too many ports that you need to have to do excursion for? Not knowing entry requirements. People, bring a passport. Just gonna say that. Book always relying on a passport. Even if you're US and you're doing a closed loop travel, I don't care. Don't do it. Just use the passport, especially now with the whole like real ID needed for flying. Like, things are complicated. Just get a passport. But also not knowing like your entry requirements, stuff like, for instance, the UK, even if you're doing a layover through it, you have to get the authorization thingies. There's like so much rules and regulations, and they're constantly changing. So make sure you know your visa and your entry requirements. Also stuff like, if you have had any legal issues at all, you need to know if you can even travel to some of these countries. Unfortunately, I've seen things where like husband has had a DUI and cannot legally travel to some countries. So you want to make sure that you know what you need to do, or you might need to get extra paperwork done. Stuff like if you are traveling with children, either without both parents. So for instance, mom is going, dad is not, or maybe dad's not in the picture, or mom's not in the picture, or grandparents are traveling with grandchildren. There are legal requirements for letters and authorizations so that parents can travel like that. So make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you book an itinerary, book a cruise, to make sure that you know, can you even go on this cruise based off of the entry requirements. And the biggest mistake that I see happen is booking the wrong room. I see this happen in two different ways. The first one is booking the wrong room type. So people will go to Alaska and book an interior for the cheapest possible room, and then Glacier Day happens and they're like, oh, I wish I had a balcony. Or there's whales and they're like, oh, I want to sit on my balcony and have a coffee in the morning just watching whales. The other room mistake is the category of room. So depending on where your location is and how noisy it is, the cheaper rooms are the worst location. Front of the ship, below the Lido deck, below the buffet, noisy areas, those are the cheapest rooms. Or they'll do like a guaranteed stateroom, which is just literally the leftover rooms, and Princess will just choose your room for you. Don't do it. Don't do it because you're not going to have a great vacation. You might be like, yes, I got this balcony, but oh wait, it's obstructed because you didn't pay attention to location and the fact that it was obstructed. Stuff like that, little mistakes that people make. If you want to know my tips and tricks for choosing the right location, go check out this video here. In-depth, step-by-step guide on choosing the best room for you.